I'm telling you, folks, I never think that this woman's ignorance or delusion can surprise me. I always think that I'm prepared for her level of insanity. And then she goes and she says something like this. Obama thinks women should rule the world.
Mr. Reagan.
All right, so in this next episode, Whoopi starts the show by defending her refusal to allow Meghan McCain to speak in the previous episode. She doesn't apologize for this. She doesn't even address the criticism that leftists don't like to hear the perspective of conservatives. She addresses the critics as if they were criticizing her for the ability of the ladies on The View to get along personally. But nobody cares if you guys like each other off camera. Our criticism is that this is an illustration of a broader trend amongst leftists not wanting to hear opposing views. So after Whoopi finishes defending herself in an utterly ineffective way, Abby Huntsman says this.
Name another show on television that does this, that talks about the most controversial issues of the day with such different women, different ages, different backgrounds, different times in their life, and does it every single day with cameras rolling. Name that other show on a network that does that.
Literally every show on CNN and MSNBC do what you guys do on your show every single day. And they do it all day on all of their shows. And what is she talking about? Women of different backgrounds, blah, blah, blah. You have 5 women on your show, all of them anti-Trump. Whenever you have true right-wing conservatives on your show, you always lose your minds. But before we get into that, I have to sell you something. Did you know that your assets are not yours when times get tough? The Wall Street Journal recently reported on 2 hedge funds that are in big trouble. These funds look after billions of dollars of their clients' money. But these same 2 funds are refusing to let investors get their money back. This will be happening more and more as things begin to implode. Where are your savings? Do you have to ask permission to get them back? If you don't have control of your money when things get tough, you're in trouble. Noble Gold has the answer. A precious metal IRA with Noble Gold will let you have real, hold-in-your-hands assets, and they're yours, always yours. Not bits of paper, not promises, not excuses. Precious metal returns are set to explode over the next few years. So get in touch with Noble Gold and discover how you can keep your money safe for when you need it. Give them a call at 877-646-5347. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com and let them know that Mr. Reagan sent you. Or you can hit the link below and get the free gold and silver investment guide.
I want to answer your question because you had
you a question.
You had your opening statement, which was how horrible it is that Donald Trump is talking about all of these people.
Sorry,
you know what
that's
I think
what you
horrible?
said. You said,
Whoopi, you know what's horrible?
That
when
it
people
was,
who
it's
shouldn't
okay.
be here end up murdering the children of American citizens.
You know what's horrible? When the president of the United States whips up people to beat the hell out of people.
No.
Say goodbye.
Let me bye. I'm done.
Thank you to Judge Janine Pirro for both Liars, Thinkers, and Liberals is out now.
You can't handle challenges to your uniform perspective. Watch Tucker Carlson. He has opposing perspectives on his show all the time. Watch The Five. Although they are 4 conservatives who tend to agree with each other, every episode they have at least one strong leftist. Juan Williams representing the left-wing view. And Juan Williams is a real leftist. Meghan McCain and Abby Huntsman, they are Republicans in name only, or what we call rhinos. There are even 2 other shows that are carbon copies of The View. One's called The Talk, and the other one's called The Real. Even Joy acknowledges this, deflating Abby's point.
Name that other show on a network that does that, and then come back.
There are 2 copies of us.
Not the same.
Yeah, I mean.
Now, I will concede that neither of those shows dive into politics as often or as intensely as does The View, but The Real, in particular, is in some ways even more absurd than The View, because the format of their show stipulates, and I kid you not, that none of the hosts are permitted to be white.
You know, it's like we're all ethnic women. You know, a lot of people wondering, why isn't a white woman on? It's just a different type of feeling when it's all ethnic women.
Yeah, that's a real thing. Look, the truth about The View, the truth that the old crones either don't get or don't want to admit or just don't care about, or maybe even that they're proud of it, is that The View is a leftist propaganda show. They perpetuate a hateful ideology against conservatives, Christians, white people, men. They do this by lying to their audience day after day after day, mainly about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a racist. Donald Trump hates gays. Donald Trump hates immigrants, etc., etc., etc. But this is the same thing that they do on CNN, MSNBC, Network Nightly News. BBC does this, Sky News, Politico, the New York Times, etc., etc., etc. I really don't see the difference between The View and these other outlets except for the aesthetic. All leftist women instead of all leftist men and women. Wow, big difference. You're so unique.
We're actually human beings having conversations that you don't want to have. Mm-hmm. We're having conversations you can have, you're scared of having, or whatever it is.
No, you're not. You're not having conversations that other people aren't having. You're not having conversations that other people are afraid of having. People have these conversations all the time at home with their friends, even with their colleagues at work. You hear these conversations all the time on CNN, on Fox, on the nightly news. Whoopi Goldberg believes that nobody else is having these conversations, probably because she doesn't watch Fox News. She doesn't check out Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin or Dinesh D'Souza or Jordan Peterson or Steven Crowder or Glenn Beck or Sebastian Gorka or Mr. Reagan. Whoopi Goldberg believes that she has access to conversations that other people don't because she watches Rachel Maddow, and not everybody else does. So she thinks that she's bringing this Rachel Maddow conversation into the rest of the public. But what she doesn't realize is that Rachel Maddow only discusses politics within an extremely narrow set of parameters. What Whoopi Goldberg doesn't realize is that she has actually confined herself to a small corner of political thought. This is a perfect illustration of the allegory of the cave proposed by Plato 1,500 years ago. It is impossible to truly understand reality based on limited information. It's the same thing that happened recently with the Horowitz report and the upcoming Durham report. Leftist journalists were totally caught off guard. They're now being forced to look into the deep state and how they illegally investigated Donald Trump's campaign in order to help Hillary Clinton in 2016. Well, they've actually got a reprieve from this because of the impeachment stuff. But before that, watching them try to reconcile these new revelations was actually pretty hilarious. All they would have had to have done in order to prepare themselves for this scandal is have watched a little bit of conservative news. Thanks to the reporting of Sarah Carter and John Solomon and others, and the pretty much constant coverage of this stuff by Sean Hannity, we on the right have been talking about this for months. But they called our claims debunked conspiracy theories, and they just ignored us. And so the left developed their own imaginary version of the corruption that has infected the federal government in recent years. According to the left, the corruption is exclusively a condition of Donald Trump and those loyal to him, when in reality, their accusations of Donald Trump's corruption make zero sense. If you actually go through and you analyze all of the events that took place from before Trump was elected up until today, and you look at all the accusations of corruption, and you go through what Trump might have been thinking, you think about how these actions that Trump has been accused of, how these might have benefited him, and what Donald Trump did to achieve those goals. None of the accusations against him even make logical sense. But if you know what's really going on, if you add into the equation all of the corruption by Democrats, if you consider what Joe Biden has been doing in Ukraine with his son Hunter, if you consider that it was the Hillary campaign and the Democrat National Committee who was funding the opposition research against Donald Trump that resulted in the Steele dossier, the dossier that was used to trick the FISA courts into granting the FBI permission to spy on Donald Trump's campaign. Although I think maybe the FISA courts were complicit in that, but I digress. If you consider that Joseph Mifsud was a CIA asset and not a Russian agent, as the left-wing media asserts, if you know that the deep state has been trying to silence General Mike Flynn because they know that he can identify and help dig out all of the corrupt officials in the deep state, if you know all of that stuff and more, then you know where the real political corruption is. And you know where your votes need to go. And you know where your loyalties should be in this time of such great political volatility. The ladies of The View believe that they are digging really deep into politics. They believe that they're special. And they believe this because they've all been tricked into believing a series of lies. And they are still simply unaware that they've been lied to.
Well, it seems like on the Republican side, no one is standing up to Trump, as far as I can say, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah. That's because on the Republican side, everybody actually agrees with Trump. Nobody's standing up to him because nobody believes he's corrupt. Joy Behar is so convinced that Donald Trump is clearly corrupt that she cannot comprehend the possibility that Republicans don't actually see that. This is just another example of what I was talking about before. Joy Behar doesn't have all the information, and so she believes that everybody on the Republican side is just ignoring Trump's corruption and therefore complicit. She's so trapped in her delusion that she can't imagine that a conservative might not agree with her. It would be amazing to me if these women were actually somehow magically exposed to the truth about everything that's been happening in the last few years. Just the look on their faces would be brilliant.
Right. But this girl, this lady, Slotkin, she served in Iraq. So losing your life is harder than losing your job to her. So she is a brave person, and she's out there. And Anthony Brandisi, Chrissy Houlihan, Joe Cunningham, Ben McAdams, Jason Crow, Andy Kim, Abigail Spanberger, all Democrats in red districts are all voting for impeachment. They're brave. They're brave. Yeah. Because they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. A Democrat voting for impeachment, really brave. It's not remotely brave. And every Democrat in Congress knows that impeachment is a sham, by the way. The Democrats voting for impeachment, the ones who represent conservative districts, those Democrats are making calculated political decisions, period. Nothing brave about a calculated political decision. And the ones voting against impeachment or switching to the Republican side because they are acknowledging the corruption of the left, those are the brave ones. But you're not mentioning them, are you, Joy Behar? Because that challenges your false narrative.
When I think about a Mitch McConnell or an Adam Schiff, they're focused, and their only focus is to win seats. Is to stay in whatever power they're in.
I have to differ with you on
that is their
I don't think that's Adam Schiff at all.
Part of their job.
I've been listening to him for months. The man is concerned about the Constitution. Mitch McConnell is not. It's as obvious as that.
Adam Schiff is concerned about the Constitution. Really? You cannot possibly believe that, Joy. I'm telling you, folks, I never think that this woman's ignorance or delusion can surprise me. I always think that I'm prepared for her level of insanity. And then she goes and she says something like this. Adam Schiff is concerned about the Constitution. It's like she's trying to be ignorant of politics. It's amazing.
If you say you don't have all the information, then you should be saying, let them testify, bring them in, let's find out, and let's end this BS if that's what it is. If it's not BS, right. You know, you either, you know, this idea of poop or get off the pot. Yeah. That's where I'm at now. I want them to poop or get off the pot. Stop saying there's nothing there. And let them lay it out. Let them lay the case out and stop preventing it. The only way you're going to know that is if they uncover everything.
Yeah,
they put everything out.
The funny thing is that Whoopi doesn't know what she's asking for. She thinks that a long drawn-out prosecution of Donald Trump in the Senate would result in revelations about Donald Trump's corruption. But what she doesn't realize is that a lot of Republicans are calling for precisely the same thing that she's calling for, a long drawn-out prosecution. They don't want this drawn out because they believe that there will be revelations about Donald Trump's corruption, but rather because they want to expose all the corruption we already know about with the Democrats. And it looks to me like this corruption would be exposed through a long, drawn-out prosecution. So I'm for this, 100%. I am personally hoping for a full investigation into what's happened in Ukraine. We can talk about the phone call all the Democrats want, because a full investigation would include an investigation into what Joe Biden was doing in Ukraine. It would expose John Kerry's connection, and it would root out corruption throughout the federal government. I mean, imagine that, okay, the Senate was going through these hearings, and before they'd completed everything, the Durham report comes out. They would then have a full, entirely new resource from which to draw witnesses and to explore new trails of corruption. That would be great. But perhaps impeachment hearings are not the place to investigate the corruption of Democrats. There are some Republicans who wish for a quick Senate vote which dismisses the whole impeachment debacle. I think that they believe that this will perhaps permit the corruption of the Democrats to be exposed in a more appropriate setting. And, you know, I can get behind that thinking, but the reason that I support the impeachment method is that through an impeachment inquiry, the Republicans will be forced to deal with these issues. And I'm afraid that if this matter isn't settled now, that there's a real possibility that they will never take it up again. I fear that Republicans will forget to go after the Democrats. The Republicans have been notoriously weak about going after Democrat corruption, even though it's clear that Democrat corruption pervades Washington, D.C. The Democrats, however, are aggressively attacking conservatives for corruption even when they can't find a shred of corruption to go after them for. They just make it up. And then people like Joy Behar fall for it. So we need to be able to use whatever options we have to force Republicans in Washington to go after Democrat corruption. It's been a serious problem for far too long. Donald Trump is in office today partly because he promised to drain the swamp. And I believe he's doing that. But we need the other Republicans in Washington to make this a priority as well. So I agree with you, Whoopi. Let the truth come out.
Yesterday, former President Obama was in Singapore talking about leadership and said, quote, "I'm absolutely confident that for 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board on just about everything." I don't know anybody who disagrees with that.
You know what? I kind of agree with Obama. Let's put women in charge of every country in the world. That's a deal I'm willing to strike. But here's the catch. They've all got to be conservatives. And you see, that's the difference between a conservative and a leftist. A leftist believes that it's the gender that matters most, while the conservative believes that it's the principles. There have been great male leaders throughout history, and there have been horrible ones. There have been great female leaders, and there have been horrible ones. And that brings me to a very important point that Barack may not be aware of. Women have run the world before, at least large sections of it. Let's look at some of the highlights, shall we? 16th century, Catherine de' Medici, queen consort of France, and arguably the most powerful woman in the 16th century. In the 16th century, the Catholic Church in France was rife with corruption, so the Protestants rose up against them only to be persecuted by the Catholic queen consort, Catherine de' Medici. Her repressive rule ignited a civil war in France, which resulted in the deaths of about 3 million Frenchmen, including many who were killed in what was called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. This was a few weeks-long parade of assassinations of Protestants in France, ordered by Catherine de' Medici. It started out in Paris, but it spread throughout the country. This massacre resulted in the deaths of several thousand, maybe 20 or 30,000, nobody knows for sure, Frenchmen, and was widely reported throughout Europe as a barbaric act of violence. Condemned even by the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian II, who was reported to have been sickened and described the massacre as a shameful bloodbath. A crazy Catholic woman desperately trying to hold on to power in order to protect a corrupt system of government, taking shamefully vicious actions against her political adversaries. Where have I heard that story before? But I mean, women are all better than us, right, Barack? So they make great leaders. Also in the 16th century, exactly the same time, in fact, Mary Tudor of England was the first female English monarch in history. So you know this has to go well, right? Mary burned at the stake over 300 Protestants, basically for not being Catholics. Mary Tudor is known today affectionately as Bloody Mary. Nancy Pelosi is known affectionately as a psychopathic bitch.
Did you tell her about us, Harry?
There is no us, you psychopathic bitch.
17th century, Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman who tortured and murdered over 650 little girls over the course of about 10 years in her castle in Slovakia. She is affectionately known as the Blood Countess. 19th century, Reina Valona I of Madagascar. During her 33-year reign, Reina Valona brutally murdered about 20% of the entire population of Madagascar for, what else? Practicing Christianity. Reina Valona would force those accused of practicing Christianity to drink a poison called tangena. Consumption of tangena killed people about 50% of the time. Something like 3,000 people a year died from this punishment. And also, sometimes Reina Valona just hung people if they were Christian, which killed them about 100% of the time. Because she's a woman, and women make great leaders. Right, Barack? Reina Valona is known today affectionately as the Mad Monarch of Madagascar. Also in the 19th century, Empress Dowager Cixi. This concubine of the emperor ruled China for about 47 years. Her reign was so terrible that it resulted in the communist overthrow of the government. That's why China is communist today. To get a sense of how awful this female world leader actually was, knowing that she was going to die soon, she poisoned her own nephew, whom she had herself placed in the role of emperor years before. She murdered him literally the day before she herself died. She did this so that he could not reverse any of her policies after her death. No joke. And by the way, she murdered a ton of other people before that during her rise to power, including small children. She is known affectionately as which roughly translates to "women don't always make great leaders, Barack Obama." It's an odd nickname for a Chinese imperial consort, but there you go. And look, as I said before, the truth is there have been some incredible women leaders. Historically, though, they all tend to be conservative. I think the best example, the one that immediately comes to mind, is the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher.
Well, it's sort of a sweeping statement. I mean, what's her name? Margaret Thatcher was not very good for poor people in the working class when she was in office.
Of course, Joy Behar hates Margaret Thatcher. I wonder who Joy Behar likes. Probably anyone who hates Trump, I imagine.
There was one small thing you were saying. What's some good news? This is a tiny thing that I noticed. You remember Richard Spencer? He's basically the organizer of Unite the Right,
lunatic.
The white nationalist group that was marching in Charlottesville. It was all in for Trump. Not anymore. Here's his quote. He tweeted last night, "I deeply regret voting for and promoting Donald Trump in 2016.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. I mean, that's big. That's interesting.
Wow. Okay, so now Joy Behar is a fan of Richard Spencer because he hates Trump. This is just getting weird. I mean, when white supremacists or white nationalists or whatever Richard Spencer calls himself, when these people align themselves with conservatives, conservatives tend to consider that a bad thing.
White power! White power! White power! What's this? Tom, it looks as if the KKK has shown up to voice their opinion. Hello, brother. We are here to support your noble cause.
Huh? Hey now, we don't want your support. We're not racist. This is about history.
Yeah. Well, whether you want our support or not, we're on your side. White power! White power! White power! White.
But when Joy Behar finds that she and Richard Spencer agree on Trump, it's apparently great. I'm sorry, not great. Interesting.
That's big. That's interesting.
So apparently Joy Behar and the left, they're perfectly comfortable condemning Trump because some of his supporters are white supremacists, as if he has any control over that. But when the white supremacists stop supporting Trump, that also means Trump's bad? I mean, if anything, it should show Joy Behar that Trump is better than she thought that he was if he's losing the support of the people that she thinks are indicative of evil racism. But she's happy, which suggests that she now likes Richard Spencer or something. I mean, this whole thing makes zero sense. I don't think Joy Behar thought this through when she prepared to present on the show that day.
Not anymore.
Honestly, this should have gone one of two ways. Either she should have gone, Richard Spencer says that he regrets supporting Trump. Wow, so does that mean that Trump's not racist enough for Richard Spencer? That's great. Maybe Trump isn't such a bad guy after all. Okay, not a likely scenario. But number two, this is the other option. Joy Behar reads out, Richard Spencer says he regrets supporting Trump. And then she goes, so apparently Richard Spencer has stopped being racist. That second one, that could be said as a joke, and Joy Behar claims to be a comedian, so that would make sense. Or she could say it genuinely because she's actually crazy enough to think something like that. But these are really the only two interpretations of this news that make any sense to express. Joy Behar was like enthusiastic, like, now we've got a white supremacist on our side. Yay!
Not anymore.
What the hell? You want their support? You know what? Go for it, Behar. I think Trump would love to see the Democrats get all the white supremacist support in the next election.
Finland now has a completely female government.
Oh, yeah.
So let's watch them as an experiment. Let's see.
Yeah.
You know what? Yes, let's watch them as an experiment. I think that's a great idea. Actually, I don't have a strong opinion about this. I dated a Finnish girl for some time in my life, and I found Finland and Finnish culture and Finnish people very charming and interesting. However, I don't know all that much about this new all-female government. They're very young. They're pretty hot. That's about it. When I did some cursory research, I found that one of them had posted an Instagram poll asking Finnish citizens whether the government should repatriate Finnish women who had previously joined ISIS. That's not a joke. One of the heads of the government of Finland was using Instagram polls to inform critical policy decisions. Now, I'm not sure how much weight she would have given to the poll in the final calculation of her decision, but hey, I don't know how many people in Finland use Instagram. Maybe Instagram polls are the Democratic tool of the future. Forget representative republics. Let's have a direct democracy using Instagram polls. Well, I think her heart was in the right place, and maybe these women will do amazing. I don't think that would necessarily indicate that all female governments would be successful everywhere all the time, but I don't want to count them out. I'm rooting for them.
I think what women have that men just, if they have it not as well, is empathy, this ability to try and understand people, to try and feel with people, and being a good leader and trying to make a difference. I think that quality we don't appreciate or talk about enough.
Honestly, this empathy argument is so stupid. Empathy isn't necessarily good for political decision-making. Women do have more empathy, and this is a huge problem that the best female world leaders have either overcome or, unlike most women, they don't actually suffer from it very much. Women who are particularly empathetic tend to be what I call irrationally empathetic. Men tend to practice what I call rational empathy. Because of the irrational empathy of some women, these women tend to be susceptible to emotional propaganda. If a woman sees an image of a child crying at the border, she might be prone to believe that this child is crying because she's been separated from her mother under direct orders from the evil tyrant Donald Trump. Because, of course, that's what it says in the headline, or it says that in the article. While most men and women who don't suffer from this irrational sense of empathy, they might look at the same picture and say, well, I do feel bad for the kid, but is she crying because she's been separated from her mother, or is she just crying because she's a kid and kids cry a lot? Maybe she's tired or hungry, or maybe her mom took away her favorite doll. Men tend to be more skeptical of that kind of stuff, and so are the most rational women, and those make good leaders. There are, of course, some great political minds that I greatly admire. Ann Coulter, perhaps my favorite of all time. Laura Ingraham, Betsy DeVos, Michelle Malkin, Nikki Haley, Peggy Noonan, Martha McSally, Dana Perino, etc., etc., etc. More important demographic anomalies that we should dissect are cultural. 75% of Jewish Americans, for instance, voted Democrat in the last election. 75%. That's just mental. And black Americans voted Democrat 90%. 90%, that's not a typo. Now, obviously, I have thoughts on both of these numbers, but that's a conversation for another video. Perhaps I'm wrong about women and this concept of irrational empathy. I'm sure if I am, you'll let me know in the comments, so feel free to set me straight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm prepared for the onslaught. And hey, if I'm convinced, maybe I'll do a video about how somebody in the comments section of my YouTube channel totally changed my mind. So, Charlize Theron visits the show in this episode, and she's there to talk about the film Bombshell, a film that I actually was in. I had a line in this movie. I think they cut it out, but I was on set and I did speak the line.
I'm obviously not a conservative, and it's interesting when you take a story on like this that there's this instant kind of like, well, what would a liberal know about doing this? And like there's going to be some agenda behind it. And the first thing that became so clear to me is that when we're talking about sexual harassment, it's a nonpartisan issue. Like it wasn't important for me to be, so we weren't telling a political story, so I didn't have to like be politically accurate with everything that obviously she had said things. We wanted to be as accurate about what the news stories were in that period, and obviously she had said some very provocative things, yes, and we felt like it was important to, to just be truthful about that and to not hit it over the head. But we have screens that would, show some of those news stories and stuff. But outside of knowing her as a conservative woman, what I was shocked to kind of realize through my research was that she's a woman that I didn't think I had anything in common with. And I learned that I had so much in common with her because she is somebody who's incredibly ambitious. She wants to be really good at her job. She's worked incredibly hard to get where she was. And when this thing happened, she was at the top, the pinnacle of her career. She was negotiating one of the biggest contracts at Fox.
Now, I haven't seen the film yet, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'm still in it. I don't think so, though, because I think somebody probably would have mentioned it to me. Hung out with Margot Robbie. She's awesome, by the way. Also, Nicole Kidman. Very sweet, very lovely woman. Now, when I was shooting this movie, I thought it was purely a hit piece on Fox, and maybe it is. I'm not sure. We'll see. I think it probably started out that way, but what Charlize Theron says about this film in this interview on The View, it's pretty interesting, and now I actually kind of want to see the film. I hadn't really been interested in it until now, but she actually made me want to watch it in this interview. And I thought I'd find Charlize Theron really annoying here because she's a pretty hard left Democrat. But she was great. On set, I will say that she was very focused on work because she was both producing and acting. But she was nice. I mean, she said hi to everybody on set, and I didn't see her blow up at anybody or anything like that. I've definitely seen that sort of thing from stars before. So I don't know. I don't totally hate Charlize Theron, I guess. Okay, she might be okay. Now, I'm happy to be back. I didn't say it in the last video, but I'll mention it now. I hope you guys all had a Merry Christmas, and I wish you the best year ever for 2020. I haven't had too much time to work on the cartoon, but the GoFundMe has been pretty successful. It's been successful enough that I'm going to be able to get at least half the episodes produced now. And so those will be coming along very soon, hopefully by next month. And if you want a Mr. Reagan mug or a t-shirt or something like that, be sure to hit the merchandise link down in the description. Obviously, I also have a Patreon page. I'm doing okay financially. Don't worry too much about me, but I'm always trying to get more and more money together so that I can make these videos better and make more content and do more stuff. All right, thanks for watching this one. And listen, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Good night.
This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.